The mahogany table stretched between us like a battlefield. 23 faces stared at me from around the conference room, lawyers in $1,000 suits, family members clutching tissues, and there, at the head of the table, my soon-to-be ex-wife Victoria, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the polished wood. She wore that cream-colored Chanel blazer I'd bought her for our 3rd anniversary, back when I still believed her tears were real. "Michael," her attorney began, his voice dripping with condescension, "let's be reasonable here. Victoria has been out of the workforce for 7 years, sacrificing her career to support your endeavors. She deserves half of everything you've built together. Half of everything." The words echoed in my mind as I watched Victoria's performance. She dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the role of the devoted wife cast aside. Her sister, Emma, reached over to squeeze her shoulder, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. Even my own mother sat there, lips pursed in disappointment, as if I were the monster in this story. $52 million, Victoria's lawyer continued, sliding a document across the table. "That's what we're asking for. It's more than fair, considering the emotional trauma you've caused my client." I almost laughed. Emotional trauma. From the woman who'd been carrying on with my business partner for 2 years, but nobody in this room knew that yet. They saw what Victoria wanted them to see, a heartbroken woman seeking justice from her cold, successful husband who'd grown tired of her. My lawyer, David Chen, cleared his throat beside me. "My client would like to review these terms before—" "No," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Every head turned toward me. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and Victoria's theatrical sniffling. You know that moment when you realize you've been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers? That's exactly how I felt as I reached into my leather briefcase. "Michael, please," Victoria whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. We both know what's fair here." Fair. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 7 years, I'd watched her perfect her act. The supportive wife who attended every charity gala, every business dinner, smiling and laughing at all the right moments. She'd convinced everyone that she was the reason behind my success. The woman who kept me grounded while I built my software company from nothing into a tech empire. "Victoria gave up her law degree for you," Emma chimed in, her voice sharp with accusation. "She could have been making partner at Morrison & Associates by now. Instead, she chose to be your wife, to support your dreams." The room murmured in agreement. Victoria's college friends nodded sympathetically. My own business associates shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, probably calculating how this divorce would affect their investments. But here's what none of them knew. Victoria had been planning this from the beginning. I remembered our wedding day, how she'd insisted on keeping her maiden name, for professional reasons, even though she had no intention of practicing law. How she'd suggested I put the house in both our names, because it feels more like a partnership. How she'd slowly, methodically positioned herself to claim half of everything I'd worked for. "The prenup you signed," her lawyer continued, "was clearly signed under duress. Victoria was young, in love, and didn't fully understand what she was giving up. Any judge will see that." Victoria nodded, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "I trusted you, Michael. I loved you so much that I signed whatever you put in front of me. I never imagined you'd use it against me like this." The prenup. Yes, we'd signed one. A simple document that protected my initial assets, about $2 million at the time, from any future divorce proceedings. But that was 8 years ago, before the company exploded, before the IPO, before we became worth $52 million. Her performance was flawless. Even I almost believed her. Have you ever been in a room where everyone thinks they know the truth, but you're the only one who actually does? It's suffocating. "You want to talk about trust, Victoria?" I said, finally standing up. The leather chair creaked behind me as I straightened my tie. "Let's talk about trust." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all day. Her lawyer held up a hand, clearly sensing danger. "Michael, I don't think—" "No, let him speak," Victoria said quickly, but I caught the tremor in her voice. "Let everyone hear what kind of man I married." I reached into my briefcase again, but this time, instead of the prenup they were expecting, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. The kind that holds photographs. Lots of them. "Richard Patterson," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. "Does that name ring a bell, Victoria?" The color drained from her face. "Richard, my former business partner, the man who'd helped me code the initial version of our software, the man who'd been to our house dozens of times for dinner, who'd played golf with me on weekends, who'd stood as a groomsman at our wedding." "I don't know what you're implying," she whispered, but her hands were shaking now. "Don't you?" I opened the envelope and pulled out the first photograph. It showed Victoria and Richard at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, her arms wrapped around his neck, lips pressed against his, in a kiss that left no room for interpretation. This was taken 3 months ago. The room erupted. Emma gasped. Victoria's lawyer started objecting to something, though I wasn't sure what. My mother's hand flew to her chest, but I wasn't done. "Here's another one," I said, sliding a second photo across the table. This one showed them entering a private residence, Richard's apartment. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "That's interesting timing, considering you told me you were at your book club that day." Victoria's perfect composure cracked like ice on a frozen pond. "Those could be fake, photoshopped. You can't—" "Bank records," I interrupted, pulling out a stack of papers. "Turns out Richard's been paying for a lot of your shopping trips lately. The Tiffany necklace you're wearing right now, the one you said was a gift from your sister, Richard's credit card." Emma's mouth fell open. She looked at the necklace around Victoria's neck, then at her sister, then back at me. "Victoria, tell me he's lying." But Victoria couldn't speak. She sat there, frozen, watching her carefully constructed world collapse around her. "Do you know what betrayal looks like when it's finally exposed? It's not dramatic like in the movies. It's quiet, pathetic, almost sad." "There's more," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'd waited 2 years for this moment, 2 years of playing the oblivious husband while gathering evidence. I pulled out another document. This one looked official, with a court seal at the top. "Restraining order filed by Richard Patterson's wife Jennifer against an unnamed woman who'd been harassing her family." I looked directly at Victoria. "Want to guess whose phone number is listed in the police report?" Victoria's lawyer was frantically whispering something in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and fear that I'd never seen before. "Jennifer Patterson is a lovely woman," I continued. "We had coffee last week. Turns out she's been dealing with anonymous calls, vandalized property, threats against her children, all because her husband was having an affair with a married woman who wanted him to leave his family." "Stop," Victoria whispered. "But here's the really interesting part," I said, pulling out one final document. "Richard came to me 6 months ago. He wanted to confess everything. He was tired of the lies, tired of the manipulation. He wanted to end the affair and save his marriage." The room was so quiet, I could hear the traffic 20 floors below us. "He recorded your response, Victoria. Would you like everyone to hear what you said when he tried to break things off?" For the first time since I'd known her, Victoria looked small, vulnerable. The confident woman who'd walked into this room expecting to take half my fortune was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "You recorded me without my consent," she said weakly. "That's illegal." "Actually," my lawyer David finally spoke up, a slight smile playing at his lips, "California is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's perfectly legal." I reached for my phone, but Victoria's hand shot across the table, grabbing my wrist. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this. Not in front of everyone." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, almost, but then I remembered the nights I'd worked late, building our future, while she was destroying it. I remembered the charity events where she'd played the perfect wife while planning my downfall. I remembered Richard's wife crying in a coffee shop, asking me if I knew why her husband had become a stranger. "I'm not going to play the recording," I said finally, setting my phone back on the table. Victoria's relief was visible, but it didn't last long, because I don't need to. I reached into my briefcase one last time and pulled out the document everyone had been waiting for, but it wasn't the original prenup they expected. It was different, newer. "This," I said, placing it in the center of the table, "is an amended prenup, signed 2 years ago." Victoria's eyes went wide. "That's impossible. I never signed—" "Actually, you did." I turned to page 3 and pointed to a signature. Her signature. "Remember your 31st birthday party, the one where you had a little too much champagne? You signed a lot of things that night. Credit card receipts, autographs for your college friends' kids." Her face went ashen as the memory came flooding back. "And one amended prenuptial agreement that my lawyer very carefully explained protects any assets acquired during marriage in the event of adultery by either party." I looked around the room. "The amendment specifically states that proof of infidelity voids any claim to marital assets beyond personal belongings and a modest settlement for transitional support." David pulled out a calculator. "That comes to about $50,000, Victoria, plus your car and your jewelry, the pieces you actually paid for yourself." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Victoria's lawyer was frantically flipping through the document, looking for loopholes that weren't there. Emma stared at her sister like she was seeing her for the first time. My mother shook her head slowly, disappointment etched across her face. "You manipulated me into signing that," Victoria said finally, her voice hollow. "No," I replied quietly. "I protected myself from someone who'd been manipulating me for years. There's a difference." But Victoria wasn't done fighting. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with desperation. "You think you're so smart, Michael? You think you've won?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell them about Sarah." The name hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face as 23 pairs of eyes turned back to me. Sarah. How did she know about Sarah? "Who's Sarah?" Emma asked, looking between us with renewed interest. Victoria's smile was venomous. "Sarah Martinez, the marketing executive from Phoenix Technologies, the one my dear husband has been having lunch with every Thursday for the past 6 months." My mother's eyes widened. Even David looked at me with concern. I could feel the tide of the room shifting again. "Those were business meetings," I said, but my voice sounded defensive even to my own ears. "Business meetings." Victoria pulled out her own phone, scrolling through something. "Is that what you call it when you buy someone a $1,200 necklace? When you book adjoining hotel rooms at conferences? When you send texts like—" She held up her phone. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Victoria will never know." The room erupted again. I felt my carefully constructed narrative crumbling around me. But then something clicked. Something about the way she was holding her phone, the angle of the screen. "Show them the messages, Victoria," I said quietly. "Show them the actual texts." She hesitated for just a moment, but it was enough. "You can't, can you?" I stood up again, my confidence returning. "Because those texts don't exist. Just like the necklace doesn't exist. Just like the hotel rooms don't exist." I looked around the room. "Sarah Martinez is my business partner. She's also married to Detective James Martinez of the LAPD, the same detective who helped me gather evidence of your affair." Victoria's face crumpled. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. "You want to know why I know exactly what you've been doing for the past 2 years?" I continued. "Because Sarah has been helping me document everything, every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to hide assets in preparation for this divorce." I pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. Bank records showing how you've been slowly transferring money to your sister's account, credit card statements for purchases you claimed were for the house, but were actually gifts for Richard. Text messages between you and your lawyer from 6 months ago, discussing how to maximize your settlement. Emma's face went white. Victoria, you said that money was for Mum's medical bills. It was. Victoria protested, but her voice was shaking. Mom died 3 years ago, Emma, I said gently. The money Victoria borrowed from you went into a separate account she was planning to hide from me. $57,000. All documented, all traceable, all evidence of attempted fraud. The betrayal on Emma's face was heartbreaking. Her own sister had been using their dead mother's memory to steal from her. Block 06. Victoria stood up so suddenly that her chair toppled backward, hitting the floor with a loud crash. "You son of a bitch!" she snarled, all pretense of the grieving wife gone. "You think you can destroy me? You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone and just walk away?" I said calmly, "that I can protect myself from someone who's been planning to destroy me for years." But Victoria wasn't listening. She was pacing now, her perfectly styled hair falling loose from its pins, her makeup smeared from tears of rage rather than sorrow. "You want to know the truth?" she screamed. "You want to know what really happened? Fine. Yes, I had an affair. Yes, I planned this divorce. But do you know why?" She spun around to face me, her eyes wild. "Because you were never there. You were always working, always building your precious company, always putting everything else before me. I was lonely, Michael. I was invisible. So you decided to take half of everything I worked for as compensation for being lonely?" I asked. "I decided to take what I deserved." She slammed her hands down on the table. 7 years of my life, 7 years of playing the perfect wife while you ignored me, 7 years of charity galas and business dinners and pretending to care about your stupid software. The mask was completely off now. This was the real Victoria, bitter, entitled, calculating. I wondered how I'd never seen it before. "And Richard?" I asked quietly. "Was he just compensation too?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Richard was everything you weren't. He listened to me. He made me feel important. He made me feel alive. He also made you feel like you could get away with stealing from your own sister," I pointed out. Emma stood up then, her face flushed with anger. "How could you, Victoria? Mom's medical bills? How could you use her memory like that?" "I needed the money," Victoria shouted. "I needed something of my own, something he couldn't take away from me." "So you took it from me instead," Emma said quietly. "Your own sister." The room was silent except for Victoria's ragged breathing. Her lawyer was frantically packing up his files, clearly wanting to distance himself from this disaster. The other family members and friends were staring at her like they'd never seen her before, because they hadn't. None of us had. "You know what the really sad part is," I said finally. "If you had just asked for a divorce honestly, I would have given you enough money to start over. We could have ended this civilly, but you couldn't just leave. You had to try to destroy me in the process." Victoria's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of her as suddenly as it had erupted. "I loved you once," she whispered. "No," I replied. "You loved what I could provide. There's a difference." She picked up her purse with shaking hands. "The prenup will never hold up in court. I'll find a way to break it." "Maybe," I agreed, "but it'll cost you everything you have left to try. And win or lose, everyone will know exactly who you really are." Victoria looked around the room one last time, at Emma, who couldn't even look at her, at my mother, who was shaking her head in disappointment, at the friends and family members who had come here expecting to support her through a difficult divorce and instead witnessed her complete unmasking. "I hope you're happy," she said to me. "I'm not happy," I replied honestly. "I'm just free." Victoria walked to the door, but before she could open it, Emma spoke up. "The money, Victoria. I want every penny back." Victoria turned, her hand on the doorknob. "I don't have it anymore." "Then you'd better figure out how to get it," Emma said, her voice steady and cold. "Because family or not, I'm going to sue you for theft. And unlike Michael, I don't have any evidence to hide. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Victoria looked truly defeated. She opened the door and walked out without another word. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't tense or expectant. It was the quiet that comes after a storm has passed. David began gathering his papers. "Well," he said with a slight smile, "that went better than expected." My mother came over and put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Michael. I should have seen—" "None of us saw it, Mom. She was very good at hiding who she really was." As people began filing out of the conference room, Emma approached me. "The things she said about you and Sarah were lies," I finished. "Sarah is a friend and a business partner. Her husband James helped me gather the evidence I needed, that's all." Emma nodded, looking relieved. "I'm sorry about what my sister put you through, and I'm sorry I believed her for so long." "We all did," I said. "That was her gift, making people believe what she wanted them to believe." After everyone left, I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes, looking out at the city skyline. 7 years of marriage, 2 years of investigation, and it all came down to this moment in a sterile conference room with legal documents scattered across a mahogany table. I thought about trust again, about how Victoria had weaponized it, used it against everyone who cared about her. But I also thought about the people who had helped me. Sarah, Detective Martinez, David, even Emma in the end. Real trust, the kind built on honesty and mutual respect. Maybe that was the real lesson here. Not everyone deserves your trust, but when you find people who do, they're worth protecting. I packed up my briefcase and headed for the door. Outside, life was waiting, a life free from lies and manipulation, free from someone who saw me only as a means to an end. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe again. If this story made you think about the relationships in your own life, I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was playing a completely different game than you thought? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and sometimes the most powerful lessons come from real experiences. And if you found yourself on the edge of your seat wondering how this would end, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Stories about justice, betrayal, and the moment truth finally comes to light are what this channel is all about. Because sometimes the people closest to us are the ones with the biggest secrets, and that's always worth talking about.